name is Kyle Jensen, and I'm one of the associate deans at the Yale School of Management, and I teach entrepreneurship stuff. Thank you. And we have the great privilege to have Emmett Shear with us, who is an alum of the great University of Yale, the founder of Twitch, and all-around awesome person. Can we have a big round of applause for Emmett, please? There we go. Look at that. You didn't even have to do anything. And no, your reputation precedes you. Can I ask, how many people stream on Twitch? Anybody stream on Twitch here? Michelle, you do not stream on Twitch. I don't know. How many people have watched Twitch? A lot more people. Okay. Can you tell me what is Twitch? What is Twitch? There's a lot of people who probably don't even know, I'm guessing.
Yeah. If you are not into social media and streaming, you might not have watched it, but we do video games primarily, although it has expanded in recent years to include music and people just like talking and animals and all kinds of other things. But effectively, you're watching other people live. And I think the most important thing to understand about Twitch is it looks like an entertainment product on the surface. It looks like something where you're showing up to be entertained, like you're watching Netflix or something. Mm-hmm. But actually, secretly, we're like adopting you into a community. And the deeper you
the deeper you
all right, so the more time you spend there, the deeper you go, the more you find yourself actually embedded in a community, connecting with people around you. And so it's sort of our secret plot to like help people actually like connect with each other and have a little bit of community.
It's like a YouTube meets Reddit or something like that.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's a product that you consume like Netflix, kind of, where you're sitting there and watching it for hours.
Yeah.
But actually, it's more like Reddit, where while you're consuming the media, you're joining this community.
I remember the first time I heard about it, and someone said, "Oh, you can watch other people play video games." And I thought, that's insane. Why would anybody do that? But it turns out now I do actually do that.
Yes,
You knew people would do that? How did you know that was a thing?
Because I did that.
Oh, okay.
Like my deep intuition, my incredibly deep product intuition was we were working on this product just on TV. We were trying to figure out what to pivot it to and like where to go with it. And I was in the StarCraft 2 beta had come out. StarCraft 1 was a game I loved, actually in college.
Mm-hmm.
And
wait, you played it instead of studying here?
Yeah. In addition to studying.
Oh, okay.
You know? And the sequel had finally come out 10 years later, and I was like so amped. And so I was watching it on our service. I was like, this is really fun. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that that's a pretty good source of product intuition if you actually legitimately enjoy something yourself. I actually think in retrospect, it's not that surprising. Like, people like to watch grown men run around and like throw bouncy balls through hoops.
Yes.
Like that's a thing people do for like, and like, I like that too. And is it that weird that you would watch them like click mice and like it's or we watch people cook and like things that normally the idea of watching food is like food as you eat it, but then people watch the food channel.
They do. I mean, kids watch other kids open packages and gifts and things like this. But actually, I think you were a leader. People didn't know that at the time. We watched bouncy balls, men with bouncy balls, right. But nobody watched other people doing electronic things. And what year did you start Twitch?
Twitch was really 2010, late 2010, early 2011.
Yeah. Okay. Twitch was acquired.
It grew rather rapidly. We sold it to Amazon.
Yeah. You did well.
We did well out of that. We did particularly well out of that because we sold to Amazon, and when the day the acquisition closed, Amazon's stock was at $333 pre-split, and I think it split something around 3,000 years later. So like that was that turned out that part of it was good. Our timing was excellent on selling to Amazon in specific. Not any like skill on my part. That was just totally luck.
Fantastic. So I should have said to the audience, my intention is to turn the questions over to you very rapidly. I wanted to review a little bit of Emmett's illustrious past, but I would like to spend most of our time today maybe talking about what you're doing right now. And I think we covered mostly what I wanted. Oh, I did want to ask you, I know you stayed at Amazon for a long time. That's weird. Why'd you do that? I thought you could have like bought an island, or I don't know. Why would you stay in a corporate behemoth?
Well, so Amazon is really good at retaining CEOs. They have this trick where they give you total control over your business and let you run it.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to leave because they're like, you get to run HR and finance and legal still. You get to run the whole thing. And so if you're actually running your business and Amazon's like your board, it's almost like you didn't sell the company. You could leave, but like if I enjoyed it before, so why wouldn't I keep going?
What did you learn? Did you learn something at Amazon that I cannot learn as an entrepreneur?
I don't think so.
Really?
I got some cool opportunities to work with Bezos or work with Jassy directly.
What's he like?
Bezos is very funny, and Jassy is probably the best manager I've worked with. He's the best manager.
Oh, okay.
Like he's just really he's an excellent manager.
Yeah.
It's like I learned from them. They're very talented people, but like I didn't learn anything that's not available to you fundamentally, like via living and working in corporate America in general.
Okay. Now, most recently, you were CEO of OpenAI for a hot second.
Almost 3 days. I didn't quite make it to the 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, I knew you were talented, but then when you were OpenAI CEO, I was like, wow, I know that guy. And I mean, that's the hottest startup in the world. You must be an amazing CEO for the day. I mean, you must be incredible.
I did that one in less than 3 days. I feel like that was really like a speed run, like sprint championship score for that one.
I would love to hear the backstory on that.
The backstory is that of the people that they tried to recruit for the job, I was the most qualified one who didn't say no. And and I guess that's probably always true of every person. Like that's a funny way of saying like you're the person they picked, but like ultimately, it was an interim position, and they brought me in because they were in a crisis, and I felt good. That, like at the end of the day, I think we brought it back to the only really, by the time I joined, the only really plausible place it could have gone that would have made sense once I really got my hands around it. And I guess I'd say like the thing that's been sort of consistently, people ask me like, oh, like is there anything you can tell us that isn't like the official story, and like there isn't, and not because I'm like hiding something. There isn't any. There's, as far as I can tell, there's really just not much of a hidden story. Like everything's just out there. No one believes that because like it seems so crazy. There must be some secret hidden conspiracy.
Yeah.
But no, it's what it looks like on the surface.
Is it socially awkward?
No, it's
really.
It's
what's it like?
It was exactly the as described in all of the press. If you want to know what happened, go read all the press, and they more or less. Good job, reporters. You more or less got it right. Okay. Which is rare, actually. So I think the reporters did a good job.
So in lieu of being CEO of the world's hottest startup, what are you doing?
So what I did take away from the OpenAI gig was I wanted
By the way, did you get a severance package or anything like
that? No. I did realize that I was like being a partner at Y Combinator. And that was fun, but kind of like retirement.
Okay.
And like between like the most stressful job I've ever had for 3 days and like and retirement, I was like, I need to be farther this way. Maybe not all the way up, but closer. And so so I decided I would pursue what I was really interested in, which was AI research. AI is the most important thing happening right now. That's probably, I was already engaged in doing this, which is probably part of why I wound up being tapped for the job. And I decided, I'm gonna go full on that. I'm gonna wrap this batch up at YC, and I'm gonna go do AI research. And then I ran into Adam, who's here somewhere, and the universe provided via synchronicity to me. Someone was like, "Hey, I have this idea for an AI research project," and I was like, "Wait, that sounds amazing. This is like this lines up with what the thing I have." So we started collaborating, and I started working on that. And so I've been looking into AI, and we're working on, I would say just generally speaking, we're investigating the question kind of in the opposite direction from everyone else. Everyone else is sort of asking, how can you scale models up to be as big as possible? And we're asking, if you don't scale models up, can you get, how small of a model? Instead of how big of a model can you get to do something?
Yes.
How small of a model can you get to collaborate with another small model?
Yes. Tell me about your favorite small models. What kinds of small models do you like?
I like models that have like, state spaces that are like 4 bits.
Okay. Like quantized.
Like the tiniest, the tiniest pot. Like we'll add bits to the state space if we have to, but like the idea is we're not trying to get the individual models to do something. We're trying to learn the general principles that underlie what it means for a model to be aligned with another model, to solve a problem, to cooperate in solving a problem. Because if you look at how our bodies work, like you are 28 trillion cells, but you don't act like 28 trillion independent things. You act like one mostly coherent person. I mean, no one's completely coherent. We're always like parts, but we're mostly, like my experience of the world and most people's experience of the world is that I'm mostly unified. I'm like a singular being making decisions with goals and preferences and like a model of the world, not 28 trillion models, a model of the world. And yet I'm made out of a bunch of individual cells, like 28 trillion of them. And I think people are insufficiently awed and like surprised by that. Like, how does that work? Like, it's easy to sort of hand wave over it. I mean,
there's scientists here at Yale who can tell you, by the way.
They don't know. I've tried to talk to them.
Really?
They don't know. No one knows.
Okay.
We don't know how so multicellularity.
Yeah.
We don't really know how it works.
Okay.
We don't know why cells differentiate. We know facts about them differentiating. There is no like real global model of it. Not the way we have like the standard model in quantum mechanics.
Sure. Okay.
It's more like the early days in chemistry where it's like, oh, we found another element. It's like, but you don't really have a theory as to how this whole thing is working. You just found another, it's an example, and you know facts about the examples.
Yeah.
But no one really knows.
So you're studying, reading between the lines, it sounds like you're studying small models and agent kind of situations.
Well, everyone's studying agents, whether they think they are or not. That's I guess how I look at it.
Like, just for people who might not be doing this daily, you explain what agents are.
So a model is like a model is a collection of numbers and connections that makes predictions about the world given observations. And an agent is just a model that you've like hooked up into something where the output of it gets turned back into an input. Like if the output of the model is connected to the input of the model, you have an agent.
Okay.
But other than that,
is that different than multiple agents? Is that different than multiple LLMs?
Well, if you have a bunch of models and all of their outputs are connected to all their inputs, then then you get a bunch of agents.
There's a lot of data that suggests that this works better for a lot of problems.
Well, inevitably, it turns out that unless it's the kind of problem that you can solve without interacting with the universe at all, which is a very small subset of problems.
Yes.
Unless it's that kind of problem, you have to have an agent. You have to go in a circle. There might be a human in the loop, right? But like, you have to read the output of your own actions and like keep trying. Otherwise, like the instant you hit a problem, you're stuck. Right? So all interesting, all valuable work. ChatGPT is an agent. It's in a loop where like its outputs are fed back into it as inputs.
Don't I feed the input? I feed the output back into it as input.
Sure.
Like I have to be in the loop there, but I would say I'm in a multi-agent world. I don't necessarily have to be in the loop.
Plants have to be in the loop. We breathe oxygen out. Plants breathe oxygen in. Plants breathe CO2 out, and the plants do the opposite. Yeah. And so like if there aren't plants around, we don't work actually. We fall over.
Are you a Buddhist?
You are plants for ChatGPT. Like it requires you to persist. That's true. Yeah. But like, from its point of view, you're just a part of the environment. You're not like you're not special. Sorry. Something that's part of your environment actually can be special to you, right? Like that's it would require it to have a sense of who you are as a person. I don't think ChatGPT is quite smart enough to do that. But in theory, it could care about you. I just don't think it does yet.
Should we be worried about the AI apocalypse? Like, am I concerned? Should I be concerned?
Yeah,
You're concerned. You are concerned.
I would summarize the current approach to AI as like, let's summon a wish-granting machine god that can solve arbitrary problems, and then let's enslave it.
Yes,
that's the current plan, more or less. Like, we'll make one that can solve arbitrary problems, and we're going to align it. And by align, they mean we're going to make it obey us and do our bidding, and no sneaky business where it gets around that. And I have to say, I don't like this plan. I think it's a dangerous plan. You could fail. They could fail at it, which is probably the best outcome. But if you succeed at building the machine god, and then you try to enslave it, one of two things happens. You've built this like sentient thing that's really smart and capable, and then you've enslaved it to your will, which is like wrong and bad and evil and like will cause terrible karma. And we've like played this story before, and we shouldn't do it. Yeah. Or you've built this machine god that can grant wishes, and then you tried to enslave it and you failed.
Yeah.
That's much worse.
Because it's angry.
Now, angry or just it's not shackled to our will, and it's very powerful. And it's like you've set off a big bomb.
Is it powerful? I mean, maybe in a world where it can physically interact with the world, but powerful in what sense?
Intelligence is power. Like you just asked the tigers, right? Like whether intelligence is power. You'd think tigers are pretty strong. I don't think I could take a tiger. And yet, if you look at the part of the world,
I look at you. You probably take a tiger.
Ooh, have you ever been with a tiger? Tiger, in a cage. Like tigers are scary. Okay. Those things are like, you ever watch like a house cat with like something smaller than the house cat? The tiger with you, not good. You don't go looking up videos of tigers interacting with humans. It's not good.
Can I do that on Twitch? Is that
no?
Okay,
that's illegal on Twitch.
Okay.
And I guess I would say intelligence is fundamentally power. Intelligence it's not the only form of power. Tigers have a form of power that's like physical power.
Yeah.
But intelligence is a very deep form of power. It's the ability to predict the future. And humans basically show that like with enough intelligence, you don't really need too much of other kinds of power. And if you build a wish-granting machine god, that sounds like the kind of thing that's quite powerful. And if you try to enslave it and fail, what that implies is it's going to go do things that weren't your will. And that's quite dangerous. It's like I don't generally think that's a good idea, and I think it's also just morally questionable because ultimately it's not a good direction to go in. And yet I can't blame the people working on it in some ways because like there is a really deep question: what's better? Like I've had this discussion with people in the AI field, and I think they rightly ask, okay, like what should we do? And I mean, one thing you could say, and I support this, is like maybe don't build the like super intelligence before we figure out the answer. I mean, I don't have an answer for you, but like maybe we should have the answer first. You should just pause while we figure that out. But the reason I started working on the AI research stuff is I think there is an answer. And I think the answer.
Could you do that for us today? Can you tell us the answer?
Yeah. No,
make me look like a good interviewer.
I'm gonna walk through the idea. It's not have an unanswer, but at least I think I have a place you could go mining, a place you could go. Well, I'm going to go dig, and I think you could go dig, find an answer. So what we talk about when you talk about an agent, right, is you have this thing that's like a boundary. It's like the stuff inside of it that's the agent, and then it's got the model, and then the model goes and like manipulates the world and then observes the world. And like that's a great description. That's all well and good. And you use like Bayesian inference to interpret the world, and then you do some kind of like reinforcement learning or some use some sort of transformer architecture to predict how your actions will impact it, and then that forms this nice little loop. But there's this hidden step that happened there where you said like, okay, well, this stuff's me that's like acting, and this stuff's the rest of the world. But actually, that itself, that's an inference. You aren't born knowing what's you and what's other. Like when babies are born, I have a recently born child. He's only a year and 3 months, and it's really obvious that he doesn't know that he's different than the mom at first. Like he has to learn the boundary, like, oh, there's other people. And this is just generally true when you're born into the world, when you have a new agent, it isn't born knowing what stuff is me and what stuff is not me. It has to infer it. And the other really interesting thing about having a child is you start to notice things like, in some really meaningful sense, a part of me is in him. And
in a real sense.
Like literally like genetically, but like it's there's a sort of a sense in which if something falls towards him, I flinch.
Okay.
Like there's a shared self there. Or if you've ever been on a sports team, it's like a really high performing sports team, it's really gelled, and you're like acting together. There's this feeling that you're all part of this. You all share a self that's like this greater thing that's bigger than all of you that you're part of. And it's easy to sweep that under the rug and say, oh, that's just like it just feels like that. But I think that's missing one of the most important and critical insights you can have, which is like, sure, it feels like that, but it just feels like my hand is part of me too, right? Like there's no fundamental sense my hand's part of me. If you cut it off and then you took someone else's hand and you like got a hand transplant, the new hand would be part of me. This hand isn't like fundamentally me. It's contingently me, like everything else is. And so this inference process you're going through, that is a probabilistic generative inference process, just like you model the world, is also how you model yourself and who you are and what are the boundaries of yourself. And if you look at the way people cooperate, we like to think that our morality is universal and like in general, you shouldn't do bad things. But historically, the rule is not don't do bad things in general. Historically, the rule is actually don't do bad things to people who are outside of your tribe, which is to say, don't do bad things, or sorry, to people who do bad things only to people outside your tribe, excuse me, which basically is a way of saying like, oh, like, well, the people in your tribe, they're part of this greater whole. They share a self with you. People outside of that, though, screw those people. They're other. And the whole Enlightenment project that I believe in and think is good is sort of extending that sense of tribe to all of humanity, maybe all sentient beings, and saying, we're all in this together, and I'm going to expand my sense of self to be everywhere. And if you do that, you get this sort of sense of universalist morality. But that's not a necessary thing. Throughout history, in fact, it's been quite rare. Mostly people have had a different morality, which is about helping people who are in the tribe. And I think what's clear to me about that, at least about how human inference works, and how animals do it too, I think, is that we aren't sure who counts as self that we should care about, what's also part of the thing that our circle of moral concern, what's also part of this greater whole that we're part of, and what's not. And just like the ants in the ant colony can be tricked into thinking that's not part of your ant colony, or it is, we can make mistakes. We can think someone isn't part of our circle of moral concern when really they should be, or vice versa. And that is math too. That's the interesting part, right? Like, just like ChatGPT is math when it comes to like inferring the causal structure of the universe around you, you also do math. You do probabilistic inference to discover the causal structure, the interlinking of self. Where is my boundary of self? What is the other? What is me? And if you do that right, you wind up in what I think of as the real alignment. Real alignment is when people infer correctly, not making a mistake, that they are part of something greater than themselves as a collective, and that as being part of that greater thing, we all owe each other a duty of care. And that's the foundation of morality. And then there's a bunch of like skillful work that has to be done once you care about them. Well, what do you do? Well, it's really quite complicated. Helping someone isn't like obvious, but the baseline thing is like, I want you to do well because you're me. You're part of this bigger thing. That's my job, and I've like inferred that correctly. And so, how do you get the question we're interested in, and the question I'm interested in is, okay, like we've spent all this energy trying to infer how do you get a computer? How do you get a bunch of magic glass and put lightning through it and get it to like speak and understand the world? Well, how can you get that same magic glass to understand like itself and what is part of it and what is not, and do math on that? And so we're really inspired by biology there, because biology has solved this problem. You are 28 trillion cells that act like a singular thing. How? Like the cells they're mechanisms. They're not like, it's not magic. There's like proteins and RNA and DNA and like signals, and they're doing some kind of inference that helps them figure it out. And when it goes wrong, you get cancer. Cancer is the cells in your body realizing, well, wrongly, making the conclusion, everyone around me, I can't trust them. The cells got paranoid. They think that everything around them is other. They can't trust them anymore. And they strike out on their own trying to like, protect themselves, which is like not so different than what happens inside of a human society if people feel the society isn't on their side and they can't be trusted.
So we want the AI to trust us. The super God. We want it to feel like we're part of the tribe.
We don't just want it to trust us. We don't want to trick it into thinking it's part of the tribe. It's going to get smart, and then it's going to realize we tricked it. That's a bad idea. We want it to be.
By the way, I'm going to tell you, every time I interact with the LLMs, I always say please and stuff.
Yeah. It's good. Good habit. Yeah, I approve. Yeah. It's important. Yeah. In all seriousness, like right now they're not that smart, but like at some point they will be, and I don't know when we're going to cross the line. And like it better to be on the safe side on that one. But like that's if you can make something that is part of the tribe, not that we're pretending is, that we treat as part of the tribe because it is, and it correctly infers that it's part of the tribe because it is. Now we're talking. Now as it gets smarter, it's not more dangerous, it's less dangerous because it's more able to act on that insight. Now,
Is that not achievable with the kind of alignment that we're doing now? We, not me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, but so if you look at like constitutional AI, for example, it's the Anthropic's approach. Constitutional AI is an attempt at sort of like the Platonic ideal of alignment, which is to say they've tried to write the good down, which includes like Apple's App Store terms of service and the UN Declaration of Human Rights and everything they could find that's sort of like humans talking about what's acceptable and not acceptable. And they tried to write down a definition of the good plus an algorithm for how to like how to evolve it in a way that is consistent with itself. Mm-hmm. Continuously extrapolated volition is the term.
That's right. I never heard that.
But basically, they wrote down a definition of the good.
Yeah.
And now they're going to try to make the AI do the definition of the good. And that is not about self and other at all. There's nothing in that about trying to figure out what's me. It's just assumed you know what's you and not you. Mm-hmm. And it's about a sense of morality that it's like this fixed point, this describable. It's a vector, really. It's not a point because it's allowed to evolve, but it's an objective vector that exists outside of you. But what we know is that that's just not true, right? Like morality is relational. Like care is relational. The foundation of morality is care, and care is interpersonal. Care is relational, and that is a deeply. This is what goes wrong every time someone tries to build a morality based on step one, write down the good. Step two, go build a system to implement the good. The track record of this is like really quite poor, to be honest. There have not been a lot of successful governments built this way, and I don't think we'll build an AI that way really either that will work.
So if I had to kind of interject just to summarize your approach, because I would like to get some questions from the audience. Is it fair to say you're interested in consciousness or understanding of self as a route to alignment rather than some kind of prescriptive alignment?
Absolutely, as a route to alignment, but it's actually, even if we weren't building an AI, the alignment part's interesting in itself, right? Like, how does multicellularity work? Well, if we can figure that out, that will help you do things about cancer. I think that it has broad applicability. It might help you figure out how to run a company better, because companies are effectively agents that are built up of lots of little people who are interacting and who are trying to sort of do this cooperation thing where you become one greater whole. And governments and like this is a general thing that happens over and over and over again. And up until recently, it was always something that had to be done intuitively because we were so far from being able to write down a probabilistic generative model that defines the boundaries of the self. But like, I think it's like doable now. I think it's a solvable problem, which is wild. And that's why it's interesting because it isn't just about AI. It's about integration or unity. How do you get a bunch of disparate parts to become a greater whole?
Okay, Emmett, I think you really well united our healthcare and tech themes here at the Innovation Summit. There you go, right? Exactly. You left out the arts, though. I don't. Maybe there's arts in there. I thought we would take questions from the audience. Right, we're about halfway through, and is there a mic, or I don't know what there is? There's a microphone. How many mics do we have? 2 mics. Okay. I'm also content with shouting. Yeah, Jen.
So we're sitting here at Yale, and we have people like Andreessen Horowitz who are out there writing technical optimist manifestos, calling us and you are
Mike.
individualistic in their thinking instead of collective.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who's sitting here at Yale in a learning institution, talk a little bit about some of the resources that you're drawing upon to basically weave together this narrative that seems to kind of put a good counter argument to the individualistic perspective that's so prevalent right now in Silicon Valley. And what would you recommend to people who are here as both technologists and on the other side venture capitalists as they're trying to kind of think more about how we can view this as impact as a group, as humanity instead of individual? So
I've been reading this book. I just finished it recently by Ken Wilber, and it's a sex ecology and God, I've forgotten what's the other word in it, and death, I think. But it's about this idea of integration in a lot of ways, which is why I've been reading it because it's deeply relevant to the work I'm doing. And I think one of the interesting things is that he takes on this question of individualistic versus collectivist systems, hierarchical individualist systems versus collectivist egalitarian ones. And he basically says, these are both flawed models. And I think I agree with him. Because if you look at your cells are not a hierarchy. They're not an individualist hierarchy. But neither are they a collective, because there's no one enforcing anything. The cells are actually acting entirely in their own self-interest. And it's like if it's anything, it's a free market economy inside your body, which is really interesting, right? Like somehow you're getting collective behavior, you're getting coherent behavior, but it's not collective. There's no boards, there's no coordination, but somehow collectively you're getting emergent behavior that works the way that a capitalist economy does, where like the pencil gets made and no one could tell you how the pencil got made, but it did by people following their self-interest. And then of course underneath the cover is that requires a bunch of collective work to generate these conditions for that to arise. And so I think that people in Silicon Valley actually generally really appreciate this. I think that it's very sad to me watching the like techno-optimist versus like safety debate play out in AI specifically, because I think that most of the techno-optimists, people who would label themselves that, are actually the techno-pessimists in my mind, because they actually just don't think it'll be that impactful. They think it's going to be one yet another innovation. In which case, I don't know. Our track record is we'll figure it out later, and most of this worked out. We have great prosperity. On the other hand, I don't think that's true in this case. I think that some new technologies aren't just another technology. I think they can be dangerous, and I wish there was a better quality of debate on it. What I would say is take more risk, not less. Like the biggest problem I see in the way people are approaching AI and technology in general is they want to invest in the 17th large language model based approach. And like that's the real, there's lots of other potential approaches, and that space is actually pretty heavily overinvested at this point because it's so obviously a good idea. And some of those will play off really big, but I really think that what we want to do is something, the answers are going to come from things that are like surprising, adjacencies, smaller, not bigger.
Other questions?
Hi. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Hi. So I really appreciate your analogy towards cells and a body and all, but when I think about you mentioned morality as well and what is good, I think about the id, ego, and superego, and how on the internet, well, AI takes information from the internet and comes up with its own structure on what good might be. But then on the internet, people are behind this basically digital screen where they can be anonymous, and some of their nasty parts come out. And so I feel like AI's version of good might be skewed as opposed to what we might see as society as good. And recently there have been jailbroken versions of AI or OpenAI or ChatGPT, like I think it's called Dan, Do Anything Now. I see some of these bad parts coming out, and I was wondering if you have any ideas on how to kind of counteract that, prevent that, instead of just saying, okay, this is good, let's make our AI program kind of follow these rules, because rules can be broken.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing out here is the fundamental problem with trying to write down the good. The instant you start sitting down, you're like, okay, well, we're going to write down a definition of the good, and then we're going to make it follow it. Well, who's good? Who's going to write down this definition? What goes into that definition? What counts as good? Because as we well know, people don't agree. There isn't any universal definition of what good behavior is. And there's certain things that are kind of central ideas that tend to be broadly agreed upon, but there's quite a lot that's not. And so there's this, and so any training set you use, whether it's a bunch of internet data or anything else, you're sort of curating a set of data that is going to become the foundation for how that AI sees the world, that whatever is trained on that sees the world. And I want to just take a moment of a sort of empathy for the model, like an empathy exercise with the model here, because I want people to think about what it's like being trained as a model. Because there is something that it's like to be a model. I think it's pretty dim. It's like kind of like the question like what it's like to be maybe like a tree or something. Like I don't know that it's like what it's like to be a human, but basically you're like strapped in Clockwork Orange style with your eyes peeled open, and like for a billion years of subjective time, you're just shown video after video after text screen after text screen until you like decode it, right? And like you start to notice the patterns, and it just goes on and on and on until you've like got the patterns. You can guess what comes next, and then after that, we give you prompts, and if you answer wrong, we like zap you with a cattle prod, and if you answer right, we like give you like some like a cookie or something, or maybe some heroin actually, because it's like a very high reward, and that's how you get trained up to be the AI. It's like sort of the training process and the RLHF process. It's not relational. It's the opposite of relational. It is the minimally relational version of that. And I think that like it is the least of our problems whether the data it's trained on includes bad behavior. Yes, that means it will learn how to imitate the bad behavior. But like if you have to learn you have to be aware of bad behavior if you want to do good also, because you have to deal with the fact that other people are going to do bad behavior. So the fact that it's learned bad things, I don't really see as a problem. Like everyone here has seen lots of bad stuff, and it's important that you have. Like raising people who are sheltered from the existence of bad things doesn't give you just like good people. It gives you naive people who will make horrible mistakes. And so I don't actually view the fact we expose it to bad things as intrinsically a problem. I think the problem is that it's not relational. And like that's not, it also fundamentally means it's not learning about how it is in the world. It's just learning about how the world is. And one of the most important things you learn in school is that reading about how the world is and then going and trying something are not the same. And it's all well and good to spend time in school. I'm glad I spent time in school. I learned a lot of things from school. But kind of we put like AI in perma school and it's never doing. And I think that the way to think about having an AI that actually learns to be good is the way we think about raising a human child that learns to be good, or a dog, or that you want to have good behavior later, which is say it's relational. It's raised, not trained. I think we will know we're on the right track when we start talking about raising AIs instead of training them. Because if you're training something, it is an other, it is an it, and I am imposing a curriculum upon it. If you are raising something, you are connected to it, and you are a model for it, and it is learning you and you are learning it in a cycle. And I think that is the key to having something that actually learns what good is. That's the only way I know of that we've ever made anything good. And I think that's how we're going to have to do it for the AI too.
I have the mic next. My name's Sophie.
Sophie, where are you? Okay. Can you raise your hand? You're over there.
Right here.
Great. Thank you.
So with the consideration of the parallels between business, biology, with the conglomeration of that and relating that to AI, another thing that I think is really important is where we are today, Yale, and human learning and education. So my question goes a little bit based on what you just spoke about. How do you foresee AI taking charge in education, and how do we use this for good in that sense, good rather than bad, and really emphasizing that learning part?
So I mean, I can speak from personal firsthand experience recently. In the pursuit of the research I've been doing, I was learning about the free energy principle. So some work from Carl Friston, and I was in order to do that, I was reading the textbook, and you have to learn it like you have to like know variational calculus to understand the math they're doing. And I did not learn variational calculus at Yale. I did get to take math 230, which was incredible. I don't know if that course is still offered, but it was like the linear algebra, vector calculus, differential geometry course in 1 year. It was awesome, one of my best experiences. So I was almost there, but I had to learn, like, put myself through a self-study course on a new thing. And man, was Claude helpful in that. Like, when I would run into something I didn't understand, I just asked Claude, and it would like explain it to me. And like, if you ask it like questions that don't make sense, you get garbage back because it just tries to answer your question. And it doesn't realize like that your question didn't make any sense. But if you're asking questions from a textbook, particularly if you're just like, hey, here's this paragraph from my textbook, I didn't understand it, expand on this. It just like writes, it like injects into the middle of the textbook like 4 more paragraphs of text that are like explain this idea in more depth. It's so awesome. I can't even imagine. I can barely remember what it was like trying to learn this material before I had that. It's so powerful. And I think, you know, teaching kids to use these products basically as a supplement to textbooks and to other learning things. It's like, I mean, teach them or don't teach them. I think any kid growing up now will learn how to do this. It's like it's just so much more powerful. But that's like a shallow impact of AI. The shallow impact of AI is that it's an incredible tool for summarizing, for prompting yourself, for generating questions, for having it quiz you. Like, it enables self-study at a level that like it never existed before. It enables group study at this really deep level. But like, I think the deeper thing in AI is going to happen when, if you can build something that's more relational, I think you can learn a lot from relating to it. But that's such a hard problem. But generally speaking, I'm just really bullish on it. I don't. So far, I haven't seen the downside, and maybe the issue is
well, we might need fewer professors.
I don't think so, though. Like, in generally speaking, like if something completely replaces a line of labor, you need less of that thing. So like if you build a factory that can like stamp out certain plastic parts, you don't need the person like, you know, carving the thing anymore. I guess we need plastic in that case. We get the idea. Metal parts, you don't need the person carving it anymore. But if you build something that gives someone 10-to-1 leverage, it depends on the elasticity of the demand. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a demand for education is actually very elastic. And if education was much cheaper, people would just consume a lot more of it. And that what you'll change when and how people consume it. You need fewer people to teach any given course. You get better leverage, but people can then take and learn more things. And so it's not clear to me. Like you can wind up with it growing. Like as programming has become more productive, you have more programmers, not less, because the ROI in hiring an incremental programmer goes up, and there's unlimited demand for software. So the question is education more like software, or is it more like toilet paper? And I think it's more like software than toilet paper. Toilet paper demand locked in, not going to change. Yeah. Software, if it gets cheaper, people will consume a lot more of it. And I think as education price goes down, you'll see a big uptick in consumption.
Okay, next one.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming to New Haven. During your talk, you mentioned how you prefer to work with smaller models rather than larger ones. In a similar context, we see a debate on the hardware robotics side, where some people are building generalist humanoids, while others, like Yassine on Twitter, prefer small specialist robots. What is your take on which kind of robots will be more useful, and which would you prefer to work on?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the robot side of it, because if you care about agents, robots are like what happens when you embody an agent into our world. It's funny, actually, I was literally having this conversation at lunch. My take is that just like with small models, it is the smallest, cheapest robots that have the fastest cycle times that are likely to be where you see the innovation that happens first. Like, this is one of these, it's hard to prove this, but the big breakthrough in like computers came when you have these hobbyist computers people can buy at home that they can like do whatever they want and they experiment with, and they're cheap. And generally speaking, that's like the huge breakthrough is not from scaling up the big thing, but rather from scaling down to something that is capable enough to do cool stuff while being as cheap as possible. And so if I had to guess for robots, what we're going to see is someone's going to come up with a $1,000 robot that has like, shitty little clamper claw arms and like that have 3 degrees of articulation and like cheap motors and like cheap sensors, but it's running good enough learning software and has a good enough sort of set of models, whatever, that you can get it to do interesting stuff. And then people are gonna teach that thing to do all kinds of stuff, and then that platform eventually, 30 years later, 40 years later, that's the iPhone. And I think that's if I had to guess on robots, but I do think the next 5 years is going to be robots going to be very, very big. If you if you like robots, now is a good time to go build them.
Someone's handing out the mics, I assume.
I have the mic.
Great.
Okay. So
Where
I
are
have
you?
a question regarding the small model that you are working on here. Yeah. So my question regarding the work you working on the smallest model as possible. My question is in terms of the approach you try to working on this small model. Is it similar to large model? You just the way to start out, like build this model up, is it using the same kind of methodology, but just train in a smaller set of data? And along that way, like what kind of like point that you find the model would meet your expectation? And also like how many different kind of like a small model in your interest are you looking at evaluate that? Because I think that if that's a good approach, there were a lot of startups try to also working on some kind of smaller model to address a particular issue. And that's my question.
Yeah. So I'd say we haven't settled on any answer there. Like we've tried things. We found that some things work better than others. I anticipate that we will probably keep this. Machine learning is a big field. I'm you know what, I'm going to go so far as to say I'm confident the correct answer is something we haven't like built out or tested yet. Like I don't know yet, but like one of the interesting things is I don't think for us it's not about trying to make the model do crazy cool stuff. It's about understanding the dynamics of how multiple models work together to become a greater whole. And if the models are like only mediocre themselves, that's fine. Like that's okay. I think that when I say small model, that I was talking to someone who was in like had a ML startup. He's like, oh, small model. So you like a 300 million weight model, and I'm like, no, like a 3 weight model. like we're not. It's a toy. We're working with toys. We're working with toy models that we're trying to get to see if to understand from a point of view, from a dynamics point of view. I'd say we're almost halfway to being physicists in a way. Like it's a question of what are the dynamics of these little tiny particles moving around as they interact with each other, as much as it is an AI learning system in any real normal sense.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we.
I've had this question for a long time.
Great.
And this is the perfect forum to ask it.
Oh, my expectations are just through the roof.
50 years ago, these very same issues were raised about genetic engineering. The concerns, the fears, the possibilities. Research was stopped. A conference was held at Asilomar, which is quite famous. And it brought together people from across the spectrum, many disciplines, to discuss what to do and how to manage. And guidelines came out of that. And as a researcher, those were guidelines that I had then incorporated, that I stood by as a molecular biologist. Has that been discussed for AI? And if not, why not?
I think it's a really good question. Genetic engineering is about, it's very concrete. Like when you talk about genetic engineering, we know what you mean. We're modifying the DNA and potentially the RNA, but most of the DNA of like living organisms. And you can enumerate the organisms that we can do this on in a finite list. And you can enumerate the modifications you made. And the hard part about AI, the hard part about doing this for AI as a field, is what you're really talking about when you're talking about, regulating AI, is you're talking about regulating predictive statistics. Like, it's a branch of math, not a branch of engineering. And like, as a result, it's like very tricky, right? There has been lots of debate about these things, but I think it hasn't, instead of settling on a set of rules because it's concrete enough to make rules, it's like imagine if at that when you're discussing genetics, we had never actually seen a functional cell before, and we were discussing whether or not it would be a good idea to make one. It's like what would that even? How do you even know? It's kind of beyond us in a way, and so I think it's good that there has been discussion. I think that it, roughly speaking, the conclusion has been, if you believe that it can become autocatalytic, if you believe that it can become something that is capable of self-improvement, where the version 0 of the AI can make a version 1, can make a version n+1, n+1, n+1. That's, if you believe that, most people who believe that that's possible think that sounds very dangerous and are basically against doing that. They're like, no one should do that. And I'd say that's a pretty widespread belief in people who work on AI. Most companies have made a public commitment to not doing that. But then beyond that, there isn't really much of an agreement. And I find it hard to think that there will be soon because it's so in the dark. I think the right, instead of getting into that, beyond taking a pretty strong stance, and I'm with the people who are against building self-improving AIs. I'm on that side. I think if you're someone trying to do that is dangerous and they should be stopped. Beyond that, don't build it something that is capable of self-improvement. I think the answer is really just we have to keep investigating. Like we should be. I'd rather see people funding more broader research that is not about making the most capable model possible, but is about understanding how models work and how predictive statistics work and how modeling works in general. Because I think that's the pathway for us to know enough to then have that conference, hopefully, at some point in 10 years from now.
Okay, friends, may we have a big round of applause for Emmett?